Okay, tonight we're going to review, because you're going to be reading and had read last night, about the division of Christianity between the Eastern and Western Europe. In your notes, make sure these notes, by the way, are numbered number 8. So in your notes, you should describe each of these images of Jesus and what can you tell about the civilizations that created the images. Think about really what's different about these images. Okay, so we'll see if you were able to figure out that on the left is the Western European image of Christ, and then the right is the Byzantine European image of Christ. On the right is what's called an icon, which is a holy image. So that's why your eye focuses straight on Christ in our Byzantine image. Also, he looks very strong, powerful, to be revered. So these icons are what Christians would worship or pray to in Byzantine Empire, and these are going to be brought up later. Our left-turn image tells a story. It's duller. We see the suffering of Christ, so he's not depicted as so strong, etc. Christianity in the Roman Empire. So remember that as Christianity spreads, Christians are persecuted by Roman emperors up until the time of Constantine. And so the center of the church is Rome, which is true still. The center of the Catholic Church is still Rome today with the Vatican. And then Constantine moves the capital Constantinople and it becomes the Byzantine Empire. Again, don't write word for word. Just gather the basics. You may want to pause. I'm going to move on. So differences in church leadership between the Eastern and Western half of the empires. The Western half is ruled by the Pope. And again, the Pope, who's still around today, claims control of all Christians at this time because there's no division. And the Byzantine church is controlled by the emperor. And since the emperor is an autocrat and rules the economy and the judicial branch and the military, they have their hands full. And so the emperor appoints a patriarch to rule the church. That's the highest church official. You might notice the prefix patri, which means male leader. And the patriarch rejects the leadership of the Pope over his people. Byzantine Christians say, no, my emperor and my patriarch are in charge of me, not the Pope. And so further differences, key differences between the two. You can see the Byzantine Empire on the map, as well as the Roman Empire, which you can see here is divided right now. So in Western Europe, priests are celibate. This means they cannot marry, they cannot have any kind of relations. They are married to the church. Latin is the official language of the church. And so up until actually around 50 years ago, this was still true. Catholic churches, the Mass and the Bible were all in Latin. However, nobody speaks Latin anymore. So people would sit through a Mass and not really know what was being said. They had memorized the prayers, but that was about it. And the largest emphasis, the biggest holiday in Western Europe in Catholicism was Christmas, the birthday of Jesus. And in the Byzantine Empire, priests could marry. This was one of the traits that caused them to divide. Greek was the official language of the church because, again, the Byzantine Empire has a great deal of Hellenistic culture. And the Byzantines felt that the people at the church should be able to understand. So they promoted translating the Bible and the Mass to the local languages. And most emphasis was placed on Easter was the key holiday, or when Christ rose from the dead. So reasons for the schism, or the split, was the disagreement over the use of icons, which are holy images. So the Byzantines prayed to these images, like the one we saw in our Do Now. They'd be of Christ, the Virgin Mary, or other saints. And the Byzantine emperor outlawed this practice, and many of the Byzantines were angry. And so the Pope took advantage of this instance to try to gain the popularity or gain the allegiance of the angry Byzantines. And so the Pope said, because again, he believed that he ruled over all Christians, he said, "Oh no, Emperor, you can't do that. That's not within your rights." And so he excommunicated the emperor. And this led to resentment by even the Byzantine people. They were like, "You can't excommunicate our emperor. He's our religious leader." And the emperor was very upset as well. And so it's sort of like a bad breakup. The emperor then says, no, I was going to excommunicate you from my church. And so they end up excommunicating each other. And neither really wants to admit that they were excommunicated first. So some causes leading up to this were in 1054, the Patriarch and the Pope meet to talk about the complaints of the Byzantine Church. And the first complaint was which bread should be used for communion. So this comes actually back to Judaism, and that the Jews they use unleavened bread. So like the flat host has no yeast in it. And then other churches use yeast leavened puffier bread. And so there was debate over what should be used, yeast or no yeast. There was debate about whether or not priests should be able to marry, and the use of local languages. Rome did not want to translate the Bible or Mass. And the Byzantines, again, wanted the religion to serve the people and to be able to translate, which you'll read more about a specific missionary who translated the Bible tomorrow night. So upon meeting, there was no resolution. And the result is, again, that the Pope and the Patriarch excommunicate one another. So we now have two different churches, the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Christian Church. Again, remember, Orthodox means normal or widely accepted. And so they become enemies, even though they're both Christian. And this will be important later with the Crusades. So Byzantine Christianity becomes known as Orthodox Christianity, or the widely accepted normal form of Christianity, according to the Byzantines. Think about why they might have done this. So basic comparison review, the Western Church uses Latin for the Mass. There's no state control because there is no state. The Church is more of a government than the Empire has, because again, it's fallen and now we're in feudal times, the Dark Ages. Western Church has an elaborate church hierarchy with the Pope at the top, then the cardinals, the archbishops, the bishops, the priests, and finally the people. So the people are far, far removed from God, and they have a lot of people to answer to. Western Church is very centralized. Whatever the Pope says becomes uniformly issued and rule. And the priests are celibate still today. In the Eastern Church, they use Greek for Mass. There is state control. Again, the emperor has control of both the government and the church, so secular and religious authority. It is decentralized. There's local languages. Different regions can practice their own customs, and priests can marry. Now we're going to take a look at some examples of architecture and arts that are. Here you see the Hagia Sophia and Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. Go ahead and notice what's different, or take note. See that Orthodox architecture involves a great deal of domes, a lot less detail. And when you look at our Cathedral of Notre Dame, it's very ornate, very detailed. You have a lot of spires and stained glass windows, flying buttresses, etc. And so we're going to see a lot of the same Orthodox architecture in all of Eastern Europe, whereas Western Europe looks more like Notre Dame. Look at the painting. Think about whether this you think is Eastern European or Byzantine. Who do you think is in the painting? And yes, it is Byzantine. And what does this suggest about Byzantine church structure? Who do you think is in this painting? Who has power? Next, we have medieval or Roman Catholic art. And you can see the figures look a lot less detailed, a lot less bright and expensive colors used, much more basic, more telling a story again.